On an ordinary London afternoon in 1814, the city drowned, not in rain or war, but in beer. A 15-foot tidal wave of porter burst through the streets, leveling buildings and sweeping away lives. This wasn't a pub tale. It was real, deadly, and soaked in tragedy. Industrial London meets the brewing boom. The early 19th century was an era of growth for Britain. Industry was booming, and London was its beating heart. Among the thriving sectors, brewing stood tall, both literally and figuratively. Beer was more than just a beverage. It was a daily staple, often safer to drink than water. At the corner of Great Russell Street and Tottenham Court Road stood the Horse Shoe Brewery, operated by Mew and Company. It was a giant of its time, specializing in a dark, heavy beer known as porter, similar in richness and taste to stout. In 1810, the brewery installed a mammoth wooden fermentation vat to meet growing demand. This vessel stood a staggering 22 feet tall and was held together by iron hoops. With a capacity of over 3,500 barrels, roughly 320,000 gallons, it was a feat of industrial engineering and an accident waiting to happen. Prelude to disaster. By mid-afternoon on that fateful October day, one of the massive iron rings binding the vat gave way. Workers noticed the failure, but were used to the groans and creaks of the old wooden structure. They didn't see it as urgent. About an hour later, the worst happened. The massive cask violently ruptured under pressure, unleashing an explosive deluge of fermenting porter. The force of the rupture was so powerful that it not only destroyed the vat itself, but also blew out the rear wall of the brewery. The sudden rupture destabilized neighboring vats, causing several to burst in a chain reaction. Together, they released a veritable tsunami of beer. A wave through the rookery. The flood was indiscriminate. An estimated 320,000 gallons of beer, thick, yeasty, and still fermenting, gushed from the wrecked brewery and onto the streets. The immediate area was known as St. Giles Rookery, a notorious slum packed with impoverished families, Irish immigrants, and the unemployed. The tightly packed, poorly built tenements offered no protection from the unstoppable surge. The flood reached nearby George Street and New Street within minutes. A frothy 15-foot-high wave of brown porter crashed into homes and pubs alike, flooding basements and demolishing fragile structures. In one tragic instance, Mary Banfield and her daughter Hannah were enjoying a quiet tea in their basement flat. They had no time to react. The beer crashed through their home with such force that both women drowned instantly. In another house nearby, an Irish wake was being held for a 2-year-old boy who had died the day before. 4 mourners in the basement were engulfed and killed by the torrent, their grief compounded in the most surreal and tragic of circumstances. The deluge also tore through the Tavistock Arms pub, collapsing a wall and pinning 14-year-old barmaid Eleanor Cooper beneath the rubble. She too perished. Rescues, relics, and repercussions. As the wave of ale subsided, chaos reigned. Passers-by rushed to aid survivors. 3 brewery workers were found waist-deep in the beer and pulled to safety. Another man was rescued alive from beneath the ruins. But not all the chaos came from rescue efforts. News of the free beer flood spread fast. Dozens, if not hundreds, of people from nearby districts descended on the scene with buckets, pots, and jugs, scooping up whatever beer they could salvage. Some knelt on the cobbled streets and drank directly from puddles. It was less about thirst and more about opportunity in a time of scarcity. There were even rumors that a 9th victim died days later, not from the flood, but from alcohol poisoning due to excessive consumption of the spilt beer. A macabre attraction. As morning set in, some locals saw an opportunity, albeit a grim one. The families of some of the victims began displaying the corpses to the public in exchange for donations. Crowds came in droves to witness the unusual tragedy. In one morbid twist, the floor of a house hosting such a viewing gave way under the weight of too many visitors, plunging onlookers into a cellar still half filled with stale beer. Even in death, the beer would not let go. An act of God. Public outrage followed, but there was no justice in the modern sense. A coroner's inquest quickly convened. Witnesses described the scene in graphic detail. The Times newspaper of October 19, 1814, wrote, "The bursting of the brewhouse walls and the fall of heavy timber materially contributed to aggravate the mischief." Despite this, the disaster was officially ruled an act of God. No person or company was found legally responsible. Moo and Company faced no criminal penalties. Still, the financial blow was considerable. The brewery estimated its losses at £23,000, roughly £1.25 million in today's money. However, they were able to recoup a significant portion by claiming back the excise duties already paid on the destroyed beer. A further £7,250, about £400,000 today, was granted as compensation for the loss of product. These financial lifelines saved Moo and Company from collapse. A legacy brewed in tragedy. Though the event was tragic, its legacy was transformative. The London beer flood sparked broader awareness about the risks of large-scale brewing and the materials used in industrial fermentation. In the years that followed, wooden vats like the one that failed at Horse Shoe Brewery were gradually replaced by more robust lined concrete and metal containers, better able to withstand the pressures of fermentation. The Horse Shoe Brewery itself stood for over a century longer, but was ultimately demolished in 1922. Today, the Dominion Theatre occupies part of the original site. Few passers-by would guess that beneath this glamorous performance venue once stood the epicenter of one of London's strangest and most sorrowful accidents, echoes in pop culture and public memory. Although overshadowed by larger historical events, the Great Beer Flood has never entirely faded from memory. The incident has become a quirky footnote in the annals of British history, an absurd tragedy that feels like satire, but is rooted in grim reality. It has been referenced in countless books, trivia shows, and even humorous reimaginings. But behind the jokes about drowning in beer lies a darker truth, a vivid illustration of how industrial ambition, negligence, and poverty collided in Victorian London. A sobering story of ale and woe. The London beer flood of 1814 is a rare tale, where comedy and calamity mix in equal measure. It forces us to reflect on the unpredictability of life, the fragility of infrastructure, and the resilience of those who endure hardship. While the flood may inspire chuckles today, it's essential to remember the lives lost and the communities affected. In that bubbling sea of porter, we see both the exuberance and the vulnerability of an age marked by change, chaos, and unchecked growth. And next time you raise a glass of beer, spare a thought for the people of St. Giles, who, on one unforgettable day, were swept away not by water, but by the very drink that was meant to bring them comfort. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most bizarre and tragic chapters of British history, the Great London Beer Flood of 1814, make sure to hit that like and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the past.